The latest is that Axios says the president has made his decision. It cites people close to him. And now we have an EU official saying, well, it's going to go ahead either way, with or without the US. But how damaging would it be to the goals and the spirit of the Paris Accord were the US to not participate?
Yeah, that's right, Vonnie. I think the first thing is, as you say, a couple of media outlets have reported that he's set to pull out. He's just tweeted that he hasn't made a decision yet. He's keeping us guessing. He's a master at social media. And, you know, twice now he has delayed a decision on whether he's going to pull out. And there is always the chance that there are some anti-Paris, anti-climate change people inside the administration who are briefing. So we still don't really know. And in answer to your question, how damaging could it be? Well, diplomatically and environmentally, it could be really damaging if Donald Trump pulls the US out of the climate accord. The US is the world's second largest emitter. It accounts for 18% of the world's pollution, carbon pollution. So him scrapping that deal could be really, really significant.
Yes, and in fact it would mean actual, physical impact on the world and even the heat of the world, right? It's going to be something like 3 degrees even with the US in the Paris Accord. So what would it be if the US decides to scrap things like, fossil fuel emission caps and so forth?
It's quite difficult to work out the science behind it, but some people have had an attempt, and we wrote a story on it yesterday and today. So the current pledges on the table under Paris still aren't enough to prevent catastrophic climate change. As you say, we're heading for 3 degrees of warming by the end of the century. And with the US pulling out of Paris, that adds another 0.3 degrees, which doesn't sound like very much, but that can lead to rising sea levels, warming temperatures, and extinction of species that could be devastating for the planet.
Is there a domino effect here, Jess, on the participation of other countries in limiting fossil fuel pollution if the US does pull out?
It's really hard to tell. So at the moment, what we've seen from countries in the last 6 months is they've been galvanized by what Trump has said about Paris, and they've said we're sticking together. In the last couple of weeks, we saw the EU, China and Canada say that they're going to form a pact on climate change. The new president of France, he's more committed than ever to tackling climate change, and they seem to want to increase their pledges as much as before. But how long can that really last? We don't know. Maybe 4 years of Trump. Well, administrations come and go, but 8 years, that people could really start to doubt whether they can do this without the US.
And there's funds that have been sort of used as a carrot, haven't they, from developed to developing markets, and that's an important consideration in this, isn't it?
Yeah, so underpinning the Paris Agreement is the Green Climate Fund, and promised by countries that they will help. Rich countries will help poor countries deal with the worst effects of climate change. Now, Donald Trump, regardless of whether he stays in Paris, has said, hey, we're not going to give this money to help poor countries tackle climate change. So that could be a real sticking point too.
Yeah, and Jess, it took a long time to actually come to the Paris Accord, right? It's not like it was just drawn up and countries signed up to it. There were intense and protracted negotiations. So what happens if the US decides to pull out and go its own way? Does it come up with some kind of other blueprint, or does climate just get forgotten?
I think it's very hard to predict what's going to happen in the future. And another thing that we might want to look at is the way that investors are reacting, because if Donald Trump, as well as saying he wants to pull out of Paris, he's saying he wants to revitalize the coal industry. He wants to build new coal-fired power plants and invest in new coal mines. And if investors react positively to that, if they start investing in these new plants that can be 50 years in their lifetime, that could have a major impact. And that could mean that in 50 years' time, we've locked ourselves into high pollution.